Pastor Mike, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Today, the Department for Enterprise, one of 8 departments inside the government. And it does what it says. It is the department that stimulates enterprise on the Isle of Man. They have executive agencies, registries. They're responsible for strategy and policy. And basically, they're trying to get business for the Isle of Man. So how are we? Where are we? And where are we going? Tim Johnston, MHK, is the Minister, and Mark Lewin is the Chief Officer. And Pastor Mike, good afternoon. It's Tim. Hi, Tim. Hi, Mark.
Pastor Mike.
Pastor Mike.
Pastor Mike. Okay. So where are we at the moment and where are we going forwards? First of all, just a quick resume of the conference, Tim Johnston. How did you enjoy it? Get much out of it?
Yeah, I think I did, actually, Andy. I think, it was interesting talking to people during the events, and certainly some of the feedback we've had. I think, a lot of people felt it went well. Clearly, you're never going to please everybody with these things, but I think the decision to, obviously, a different location, slightly smaller venue, sort of more concentrated.
Yeah.
I think it led to, from what people sort of said to me, better debate, I think. And so I think overall, it's a good thing. I think it's good that we do it. I think it's important that we do it. Like I say, we did our sort of road shows in the spring.
Yeah.
I think that was again, it's another opportunity, and certainly quite rightly the Chief Minister has committed that we'll do that again next year. And I think that's, again, it's important that we get out and have these conversations.
How do you explain, to members of the public, to constituents even, the function of at the enterprise, the ministry? How do you say, obviously finance, visit, digital, business, and bits located in there as well. How do you explain what you do? Because half the time it's happening behind closed doors, or, business is in the pipeline. How do you explain it to people?
Well, on one level, obviously, we make sure that we publish what we're doing, and we do that obviously through Tynwald. And earlier on in the year, we published, all the agencies published their plans for the year ahead, setting out their targets and their ambitions for the year ahead. And of course, as a department, we also published our department plan in May. That was debated in May in Tynwald. So that's always available, accessible for anyone on our website to go and see those and see what we're setting out. Again, I think it's important that we have things like the conference where we can then talk about that and expand on it. And certainly, economic development was an important part of the conference. So it gave me the ability to stand up and talk about that, and some other officers to talk a bit about some of the things we're doing. And I think, but you're right, I think it's a constant challenge we must take up to explain what we're doing and why we're doing things at times. And like you say, we don't own the economic strategy, but we're an important part of it. And the Department for Enterprise doesn't create jobs, business creates jobs.
Right.
But what we're there to do is to help make sure the playing field is as level and as open as possible, so that businesses can thrive and move forward. And we have those conversations with business about their challenges and what we can do to help that.
The Chief Minister's been leaving nobody under any illusions. He basically said times are tough at the moment. Everybody's under pressure. Does the department feel any pressure to move things along?
Absolutely. I think, that again, one of the things we recognise, and the Chief Minister talked about it, the idea of we must progress as an island, we mustn't regress, and some of that's based on some fundamentals around the fact we have an ageing population, the need to make sure that we're growing our working age population, because ultimately we have public costs to pay for, and we need to make sure that we've got the income coming into the exchequer for that. So an important part of that is growing business, growing the economy, making sure the island's an attractive, exciting place for people to want to come and live, and we need to invest to do that. So it's really important. We recognise that we've been through a really difficult time as an island. I think as a world, we've seen that. We've seen some of the big issues that have affected us. We came in a new administration in the September 21. We already started seeing inflation increasing. We went into the war, started in Ukraine in 2022, and it's been a pretty difficult time. And of course, we were still coming out of COVID at that stage. So there's been lots of big issues that we don't necessarily have a direct control over that affect us. But what we have to do is look through that and say, well, what we're aiming for. And I think that's the whole point of having that plan, having the island plan, having the economic strategy. It says, yes, things come along and knock you sideways sometimes, but you've got to have a clear direction of what are the challenges we have and what are we doing to sort of move forward. And that's certainly what we need to do in the department.
So there's no such thing as standing still at the moment. We have to move forward.
absolutely no room for standing still. I think we see the challenges in the economy. I think we have to be also recognise that the health of our economy overall. I think we're doing very well in many ways. We've got more people in work now than we've ever had. We're seeing that job growth. That's really positive, but absolutely cannot hide the fact that some sectors especially are finding it really, really difficult. We've seen big hikes in energy costs over the last couple of years. We've seen increase in wage costs. People haven't got as much money in their pockets and not going out as much. So we're certainly seeing, for example, in hospitality, retail, those sectors, really difficult. So we cannot ignore that. But at the same time, we also have to say, be confident enough to say that the fundamentals of what we're doing as an island, I think, are right. But let's not underestimate some of the challenges.
Okay, Mark Lewin. Mark, who are we up against on a worldwide playing field? Who's aiming to take our dinner off our plate?
That's a great question, Andy. And I guess it depends in terms of the context. So we talked about, you mentioned before about visit and tourism, and clearly, the whole of the British Isles is a target for that. And we know there's more we can do in that space to grow our own market share. And we have an amazing offering, and we'll continue to promote that. I think when you look at financial services, you're into a different group. So we work closely with some other jurisdictions, Jersey and Guernsey in particular, City of London, northwest of England. But then you'll find other centres around the world, Malta, Gibraltar, depending on the markets in which the sectors face. One of the things the Department for Enterprise does a lot, as you'd expect, we talk to industry, we listen, and particularly through the executive agencies, that's where there is a grouping of people that can come together and talk about exactly that point. What's happening in competitor markets? What are they doing in terms of responses? What are the ideas? How do we prioritise those, and how do we take them forward?
Okay, so the executive agencies again are?
So we have one for financial services, Finance Alaman. We have one that looks after our digital economy. We have one that looks after both our domestic economy in terms of hospitality, retail, construction, but also looks after our export sectors, food and drink, engineering, etc. And that's business. And our fourth executive agency is our visit agency, which clearly looks after tourism.
Are we expecting any heat from a Labour government in the UK?
It's certainly something we are monitoring, and even before before the change of administration, there was already extensive outreach both at a political level, but also at an officer level. We have lots of contact over a wide range of topics of mutual interest and areas that we wish to progress. Clearly, when any new administration arrives and they have a set of things they want to pursue, we're interested in that. We'll continue to watch. Sometimes they don't always pan out like that, so it is still early.
I remember
days
when Tony Blair got in, was it the Andrews report that that lasted a couple of years and really didn't go anywhere, did it? They were expecting sort of millions hidden away in suitcases here, there, and everywhere. And nothing really happened last time.
That's right. And sometimes that is about exposing the evidence. Let's get underneath the covers of what perhaps there is a perception. Let's get into the detail. And that's what happened then is when they looked at it in detail. That some of the perceptions just weren't borne out by evidence. We are a very responsible partner internationally. We work hard at that. We work hard with partners around the world, UK included. So, but I know there's a lot of commitment to work with the new administration. There's, the conference is just about to start, and obviously the chief's there. I think, Minister, you're going next week.
I'm going to the Conservative Party conference as well, because again, we have to make sure that we're keeping close relations with our colleagues in Westminster. I think the point you made, Andy, before, about we have to work hard because unfortunately there are sometimes misconceptions about what we do, and therefore we have to make sure we're working hard to constantly explain who we are, what we're doing, and the high standards that we work to. There's always, whether Labour or Conservative, there are always people who champion the island and understand us, but there are always those who maybe don't understand. And so it's important that we engage and we have those conversations and we keep those relations going, because even in opposition, you have members, for example, in the Conservative Party who will be sitting on select committees, etc., in Westminster that, maybe asking questions around justice and other areas. We need to make sure that we're speaking to them and we're having those close relations.
And typically, what will you be doing at the Tory Party conference?
Well, I think it's always an opportunity to meet people across the party, people who've only just recently come out of government and therefore are very, knowledgeable. I think one of the interesting things that was mentioned at the conference actually by we had an individual from Lexington talking about Westminster, and the point he was making was, the new Labour government, there's a huge amount of inexperience there in those people coming into government for the first time. That's going to take time to build that experience. We need to make sure that they fully understand who we are through that process. At the same time, there's that collective memory still within the Conservative Party. Again, we need to make sure we're linking into that and still carrying on with those conversations.
OK, to the phones we go. Neil's with us. Hi, Neil. You're with Tim Johnston and Mark Lewin from Enterprise.
Good afternoon, Andy, and good afternoon to your guests. My question is very simple. What plans are projected for the Ronaldsway Airport Gateway project, which has been mooted now for 10 or 15 years? The reason I ask is I know that the government have acquired approximately about 45 acres of land from the rear of the western side of the Ronaldsway Aircraft Company. There's a large area of land there. Some of the area is zoned as business park. Some of the area further south towards where I live is actually zoned as open space. Now, some of this open space land has recently been overruled by planning, and they're allowing housing to go on here. So are the area plans actually worth the paper they're written on? Because my answer to that would be no. And secondly, I would like to know, do I have to leave this area now before there's a huge impact on my property and those of my neighbours? Or what plans are actually in place for this area, please? We would like to know.
Tim Johnson?
Well, thank you for your question. I think it's difficult to answer some of that. I think when we're looking at planning policy and planning processes, I'm not really in a position to be able to sort of comment on that directly and what may be happening. As far as the broader plan of the airport, and I think some of the discussions that we had at the conference, and the bigger plan, which will be more detailed to come, is actually how the airport funds itself and goes forward, and how we make sure we're generating the returns to be able to invest in the airport. And I think we all recognise that needs to happen, and we need to improve those facilities. Connectivity is really important. What you find in the UK is a lot of small airports, like what Ronaldsway is. They obviously own and manage a lot of their estate, and how they raise income is obviously often through how they manage that. So I think that'll be part of a much broader plan coming forward with the new board that'll be going in place for the airport, so that they're looking much more holistically at the whole site really, and what that means. But I can't really comment specifically on those development issues.
How is it going to affect you, Neil?
Well, the land directly to the north of me is actually zoned as open space, which is the same designation as Mackle Brews or Santon Head or any of the glens on the island. Now, I would have thought the area plan would have retained that classification, because that's the soundbite by which most people on the island go forward. We need to know what's happening within our areas. However, a chunk of that has recently been overruled by the planning inspector and now has been zoned for housing. But I do know that to the western side of Ronaldsway Aircraft Company, there were plans in place for a cannabis facility. I did see people out there surveying the area, etc., etc. And there's a huge amount of land there. It goes right down to the railway line. It extends down towards the Sefton Express. And it would be interesting to know what's actually happening on the area. It's not the airport itself I'm concerned about. It's the surrounding area to it and what the plans are for the future on that land.
Okay, Tim?
Well, I think, you mentioned the sort of some of the development, and obviously opposite like you say quite rightly, opposite the airport there is what's called the Airport Technology Gateway. That is an area that is classified for sort of light engineering, manufacturing, etc. And obviously there are businesses obviously on that site. And yes, there is an application there to look potentially to develop a medicinal cannabis facility there. Clearly, that's that fits in within the classification of land use. So absolutely, there's a process at the moment.
And that's
looking
on
at
the Ronaldsway site, the industrial estate.
That's right, and I think what we've seen in the past, of course, is, and this is often some of the complications of government of who owns what and who manages what. And I think part of that whole process of looking at the airport is saying, well, who manages that whole area, who receives the return of that area, etc. And that's some of the processes going on at the moment.
Okay.
I could just perhaps add, Neil, that certainly from a Department for Enterprise perspective, that the land that is zoned for industrial, so not the open space, but that is something that we continue to market. We are committed to making sure we invest in areas to make sure it is presentable, so things like around the entrance, working with partners, particularly working with the landowners and the tenants, etc., in that area to make sure that ultimately we have a long-term sustainable business park, industrial park in that area.
Okay, all right, Neil, thanks for that. Just on another related subject, whatever happened to the much vaunted cannabis industry that was going to come here? Where are we with that, Tim Johnston?
Still very much in train, Andy. I think it is complicated, obviously, getting the processes in place and ensuring that the right licensing is in place and inspections, and that takes time, and that's legislative change as well, and that is a process that we've been going through. As I say, there is an application in now, planning application in for a site on the ATG. That's now in progress. So we look forward to see the results of that. So certainly, absolutely recognising that one of the keys of the economic strategy was, how do we diversify our economy, look at new markets, new opportunities, and clearly this is a sector that came up very quickly, and it's something we're wanting to sort of make the most of. But it is a I wouldn't say controversial subject, but obviously, of course, that you have to make sure you have the right checks and balances and legislation in place to make it work commercially going forward. Okay,
here's a message in from Les, who just said, you mentioned the aircraft registry that Enterprise looks after, one of the registries. Can you give me just a brief pencil portrait, Mark Lewin? What does the aircraft registry does? And it obviously makes money for us, but where did it come from, and how is it doing nowadays?
So there's two aspects of it. The Civil Aviation Authority, which is its technical term, it looks after the regulations that apply to the Isle of Man in this space. So it also includes the regulation of the airport, regulation of our airspace, aerodrome, etc. It also has an international facility, very much looking out and supporting owners of aircraft of different types, and the idea was many years ago now. But in terms of, we're already doing some services we provide, very much working with the likes of the UK. It was at the time, but how can we do that in a way that provides better service? And that really was the thing that differentiated us. So being able to, a small team of people that can speak to customers, can help them, can advise them on the relevant safety standards to make sure that we operate a really strong, attractive proposition for those aircraft owners. And over many years, we've seen lots and lots of aircraft come and provided some good services. And then over the last number of years, we've seen the market changed. Other jurisdictions have come on board. The propositions changed slightly, and we've seen a reduction on those numbers over time. But we still provide a really highly regarded service to those owners that use the Isle of Man Aircraft Registry.
Okay, Michael's with us now. Hi, Michael. You're live with the Department for Enterprise.
Faster my Andy, Mark, and Tim.
Faster my.
Right. So last year the DFE put up the minimum wage again, and rumour has it it's going to be put up again for next year. And then Treasury comes along and puts tax up by 2%. But the one that didn't really get the headlines, which I thought was bigger for business, etc., was the 9% in national insurance. Now, so basically the poorer paid got very little out of that increase because it was taken away with the other hand. Yet the people in the middle, the businesses, they're whacked both ways. I think it was Tim already alluded to the fact that there's less money in people's pockets. Yet all along, I'm talking from a hospitality view, all along hospitality businesses are expected to take the impact of the ever-increasing wages, and it's not the minimum wage that's the real killer, it's the fact that the people above the minimum wage won't work for minimum wage. So their wage has to go up as well. And yet, as he said, there's no money in anybody's pockets, so people don't want to, you can't put the prices up all the time because people just haven't got that money to pay. So basically, we've seen so many really good standard businesses going to the wall or just giving up because they can't continue anymore. I see that it's politically astute in some ways to raise minimum wages because it looks like you're really good politicians. But what it's really about is getting the extra revenue for government. Also, so just I realise you can't put the genie back in the bottle now, but I think one thing that you could do would be to have an interim period between 18 and 21 years of age, because at the moment, as soon as somebody their birthday, their wages go up massively. It doesn't encourage business to employ young people because they're mainly inexperienced. So I just think that would be one way that they could help us. But I realise you're DFE and not Treasury, but still.
Okay, Tim Johnston.
Thank you. And I think you're raising some interesting issues there, and that's that difficult balance and challenge that we have between recognising, for example, that the costs of living on an island are higher. We know that the need, and we see the number of vacancies we have in our economy at the moment, and the challenge of keeping our young people on island in jobs that are at a decent pay, and also being able to attract young people and people to the island to work in our economy. And therefore, it is important that we make sure that we are competitive and providing minimum levels of payment that recognise that, and that's why the government is committed through the Island Plan to actually move towards a living wage next year. As far as the setting of the minimum wage is concerned, that is not done by DFE, and that is done independently, assessed through the Minimum Wage Committee. That's an independent body that sits and makes a recommendation, and that recommendation is then taken forward to DFE and Treasury for further discussion, and then a recommendation is put forward. And as you say, we had the raise in the interim period from the 1st of July this year, up to £11.45 for the main rate, and a youth rate of £8.75. It was a Tynwald decision several years ago to change the bandings to make sure that we are recognising some of these challenges. That if we are wanting to attract people, that we do need to have those competitive rates. I think there's a broader piece of work which some of what you were talking around taxation and probably around thresholds, etc. And certainly, I know there's through the tax strategy that was mentioned and brought forward by the Treasury Minister, there is work going on into that to look ahead to make sure that some of those areas are being looked at around thresholds and where people start paying different levels of tax, because I think that is an issue we recognise. But ultimately, we also have to be competitive.
So, Michael, how difficult is it to just put your prices up?
Well, we're not just competing with the island, we're competing with the rest of the world. And it's difficult to attract customers into the door in the first place, but then, people just, they haven't got the money in their pockets to pay. So, I mean, we kind of got two tranches to our business. The restaurant and bar,
yeah, and
also the accommodation. So in some ways we're kind of luckier than other businesses, but it's very difficult when we've got the likes of the steam packet they're charging a lot. So we're on that area of the business. It's quite difficult. Sometimes we sell a room and then people come back to us and say, well, we can't afford to get here, so it's cancelled. So, but that's very difficult. And also, constantly putting the prices up, people just can't afford to pay it now, and they won't pay it.
Have you got the same number of staff as you used to have, Michael?
No. We have to just make do somehow.
So you've cut back on that?
Yeah. It's a very difficult equation. It really is. And once you've got staff, you don't want to lose them again. So, but there's a big difference between summer and winter trade. I mean, we've used quite a lot of school-aged people over the last year or so, but a lot of them try very hard, but they also have their limitations.
Okay, all right. No, we appreciate that, Michael. Thanks for all those points. Actually, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be talking to Deborah Heather and Ranald Caldwell from Visit Isle of Man, so no doubt we'll come back to tourism more in the future. But the question of minimum wage is an important one. You mentioned recently, Tim Glover, didn't you, that hospitality businesses will have to ask themselves difficult questions about sustainability. What did you mean by that?
I think we're having a conversation about the creation of our new hospitality board.
Yeah.
We saw, and we've seen some of the challenges expressed by businesses on Ireland, and especially in the retail, hospitality, leisure sector. As you recall, we had a meeting before TT. It was the Manx Museum, where we had a lot of people came together to talk about some of these challenges, and that led to some short-term support plans over the TT period to help businesses. But what that whole process really tells you is the importance of us getting in a room together, talking about what are the issues and how we can help and how we can move forward. So I'm really pleased that we've seen this body formed, because it's not good for anybody having sort of erratic, sort of disparate views coming in from all different angles. I think it's important that we get people in a room together, people who have that knowledge in the businesses, and to work together towards something that is more sustainable. So I think as a government, we've got a new local economy strategy, the work that's going on at the moment for the DfE and the business agency. We're talking about Visit and the importance of getting increasing footfall for businesses on the island and making sure that businesses are attractive for customers. We had our Manx menu competition early on in the year, which I think those people who involved found really positive. So let's make sure we're doing all we can to drive footfall and into businesses. But part of that whole process is having that bigger conversation about sustainability. And as a government, when we're looking at putting taxpayers' money and support into parts of the economy, we've got to make sure we understand what that money's doing, and I think it needs to be something that's sustainable and defendable, and I think and that's part of that process.
We're live with Department for Enterprise today. Mark Lewin's the Chief Officer, and Tim Johnston, MHK, is the Minister. Next, I've got a couple of questions about motorsport.
Foot or leg problems? Then contact Pop Podiatry, where all services are carried out by an HCPC registered and qualified podiatrist using the latest clinically backed treatments and devices, including the new Swiss Shockwave high-powered laser treatment for tendinopathies, plus nail surgery, verruca treatment and more. Conveniently based at the Nunnery in Douglas, see what Pop Podiatry can do to help you. For your free assessment, book online today. Get back on your feet soon with poppodiatry.com.
Island Hearing Limited, your local hearing care specialist since 2009, with branches in Port Erin and Ramsey. We provide the very latest hearing aid technology available, which you can try at home, with excellent aftercare and a wax removal service available using microsuction. Give us a ring on 830 722 or visit Island Hearing at One Station Road, Port Erin. We're happy to help. Island Hearing, always listening.
When you need a fitting memorial or headstone for a loved one, contact Manx Memorials in Peel. This long-standing family-run Manx company offer a wide range of granite and marble headstones and memorials, along with an island-wide inscription and renovation service. Manx Memorial's skilled professionals will take the time to help you choose a suitable memorial, and we're proud to say we'll beat other local quotes. Call 843 861 or email matthew@manxmemorials.co.uk.
The Isle of Man Festival of Motoring is back this September, and this year we're celebrating the very best of Britain with a huge gathering of British classic and sports cars. Have a ride with the Sporting Bears at Douglas Prom on Saturday the 21st, with all proceeds going to Lukey's Aid charity. Find out more at iomfm.com. Enjoy the best of British with the Isle of Man Festival of Motoring, revving up the island this September.
Coming up, we have another winning weekend here on Manx Radio. And this time, we're giving you the chance to win £200 to spend in-store at B&B Furniture. All you have to do is listen out for a winning question, which we'll ask on air right across the weekend. And once you've heard it, text your answer to 166 177. B&B Furniture is celebrating over 45 years of serving the island with lots of anniversary offers. And to mark 30 years in their purpose-built store, they're offering up to 30% off selected items. Make this your winning weekend with B&B Furniture and your nation station Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
With Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin. Mark, here's a message about the airport. Losing the engineering facility at the airport was a disaster. You've got a large facility lying rotting there. Any plans to chase airlines to offer, as an offer, to relocate part or their engineering facility to the hangar?
So I think any loss is a challenge for us, and I do understand, and the building has been empty for some time. We work with lots of different areas across government. So in this case, we do work with the airport, has a new airport board with non-executive directors, and we are collectively really keen to see all of the facilities down there used to full potential. So there are conversations. Obviously, I can't go into detail now, but a number of people are showing real interest in the various different facilities down there, and that's something I know that the airport board is really keen to see come to fruition. The things that will value both the economy but also provide value to the airport.
Yeah. I mean, they were very well-paid jobs and skilled jobs, weren't they?
They were.
Once upon the Manx Airlines engineering facility.
And it highlights the challenge in that area where that existed because planes were able to fly here and be serviced, and ultimately when the planes change and different needs change, and then there are other places closer to where those planes are operating, that was the thing that really took that advantage away.
Do you play any part in attracting airlines to the Isle of Man?
We play a real part, again, working with the airport board, working with the Department of Infrastructure in terms of looking at what the routes need to be, talking to the airlines. Certainly earlier this year we become far more engaged in that, and we're now leading a piece of work with the airport around what the longer term needs to look like in terms of sustainable core routes, regional routes, providing much more long-term stability in some of those areas. So yes, we do talk to the airlines, talk very much hand in hand with the airport board and their team there.
Now, Loganair obviously saved our bacon during COVID, but obviously we have subvented them. We've put money into some of those routes. Are we the only people that subvent routes? Does it happen anywhere else?
It happens all around the British Isles, and indeed it happens further afield as well. I think post-pandemic is a completely different world of aviation than obviously before 2000. Many of the routes, take Loganair as an example, that they fly to and from, has some form of either local or national intervention to support that. So you're quite right to say that they were a real lifeline for us alongside the steam pack, and coming out from that, helping to make sure we grow responsibly and sustainably the route network. We've had to, as government, step into some of that space to provide choice, both choice of airlines, choice of routes, choice of times, etc. And I know that's something we're really keen. We recognise that's more. We're looking forward. We're probably going to need to continue to do that, and actually some of the other routes as well, where our economy is telling us and our society are telling us that they want better, longer-term connectivity. Then that's something again we're going to have to put into the mix to say what role does government have in that to play in that place.
Okay, the Island Infrastructure project is where government puts money into companies that are putting specific projects. Is that right?
Yeah, Andy, this goes back to some of the discussions that were had after the last election when we're looking at these are privately owned brownfield sites. So some of these sites that we see around the island that have been laying empty for many, many years, decades in some cases, and saying, this is not a good look. What can we do to stimulate the development of these sites and get some of the things we want to see built as well as an island when we talk about the infrastructure we need going forward.
So typically places like the Villiers Hotel,
that's right,
which has been
decades,
30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. The idea is to have those conversations with people who own these sites and say, okay, clearly you're not doing anything on these sites. Well, there's obviously a reason why you're not, because you're doing the sums and working out that this isn't viable. So it's about viability. Right. So we say, what can we do to get you to do something on this site to make sure that we're getting some development going forward? And that is therefore looking to how we help leverage that private investment by government putting a small amount into that. So for a residential development up to 10%, and on a mixed development maximum of up to 25%. And that is based on calculations of viability of that development, with the principle being that no public funds or money would actually be paid out until that development is fully built and completed. Right. But of course, through that process, which would take a few years of construction, we would already get back half of that commitment we put in anyway through the exchequer benefit from the construction.
And this activity. Is what members of the public sometimes don't understand, that for, let's just say typically for the Villiers site, that will employ dozens of people at least to obviously to tip concrete, to put steel girders up, to design the whole thing. So you reckon that the money will come back through receipts? What is it? 25%?
We were looking at a commitment on a mixed site like that. So we're looking at I think an 80-bed hotel. There's new office space, new retail space. That's what you call a mixed development. So the maximum grant we will be looking at will be up to 25% on something like that. And like you say, through that construction activity, that commitment, that say if it was 25%, you'd be looking to get about a half of that back through that construction process. But then of course, the operation of that building and those buildings going forward will then also bring a return. So it's cost neutral to government. And
you guarantee not a penny goes to the developer until it's completed. Until it's handed over.
So, but we get built what we want to see built, and we get this, and we move things forward, and that's what we're trying to do as an island, as a government, to say, because one of the issues that people do raise when we talk about increasing the working age population, etc., and people say, well, hang on, what about the infrastructure? Well, these are the sort of things we need to do. So that's very much on privately owned sites. Then we also have the Manx Development Corporation, which is looking at the publicly owned sites in principle, mainly, although they may well do some work elsewhere as well. Again, it's about looking at space and saying, how can we reimagine this? How can we make this work better for us?
Well, David Peach was saying from the board, they want land. They want government to release some land. Places like they got their eyes on the Park Road school site.
Yeah, and of course what they're doing is they've got existing projects which are well advanced. The first one being the old nurses' home, and confidence that's going to be completed early next year, which is really great. There's obviously ongoing sites around Westmorland Road. Clearly what they're always doing is looking ahead to say, well, what's next? What's in the pipeline? And they want to have those conversations with government. Often sites are owned in different departments. Sometimes I think there is frustration at the time it takes sometimes to get through some of those processes. But the main thing is we have those conversations, and we have a pipeline going forward to keep momentum.
So government doesn't own it as a whole. It's departments that own the land. Is that right?
Well, I think it's important to understand when we talk about Isle of Man government, actually Isle of Man government as an entity doesn't actually exist. What we have are departments, and different departments own different bits of land, and part of the work that's going on at the moment, and has been for a few years, is actually understanding and getting all that in one place, so we can make quicker decisions and manage that national estate, if you like, more effectively.
Okay, Tony. Hi, Tony. You're live with the Department for Enterprise.
Good afternoon. I'd just like one correction there. The departments don't own anything. It's all owned by the taxpayer. There needs to be a clear-cut admission by the government that they don't own these things, they're just managing them for us. And when you say things like that, you lead to the wrong area, if you like. I think you should be very careful of saying the departments own anything, because they're only holding it in trust for the people who are paying the taxes. Right, so my original question was, I'm not sure if this falls under your remit, but there's two things. One, you've got an ageing population, which you're well aware of. Some of them are paying taxes, some aren't. But the issue is, a lot of them are sitting in houses that are not suitable for them going forward. And a lot of them could release those houses to the market. And I don't know how you do that, but there must be methods to do that. And thereby move those older people into homes which are more suitable in the long term, or residences where they can live as a group or individually. Now, I don't hear very much about any assistance for the companies out there who already have homes, care homes. And I don't see why we don't have that as a driver, because if you do that, you will stimulate the economy because you'll release housing and you won't have to build new housing. You'll be able to rent old housing. The second thing is, along the same sort of lines, the government has never made any effort to do anything with the post offices. And I'm at a bit of a loss to understand why. Maybe you could explain that. But the post office could be an alternative for bank branches for those people who live out in the countryside and, again, are older and don't want to drive to the main branch in Douglas because you can't catch a bus. It would take you all day to do a trip to the bank. I think there's opportunities which are very simple but are not being even spoken about.
Okay, all right, let's go. First of all, the post office thing. Post office reports to you, doesn't it?
Yeah, ultimately the post office is obviously is a statutory board. It has its own board in itself. But as far as the structures are concerned, it comes under the remit of the Department for Enterprise. But it very much we don't actually influence decision. It is very much run as an entity as a post office.
Okay. Any thoughts on what Tony said?
Yeah, I think raised some interesting points there, and I think initial point. I know what you're saying. I think ultimately. You're absolutely right to say that, of course, we are ultimately the taxpayer is the ultimate owner, but clearly legally there are owners of this property. And
he was objecting to your shorthand, I think.
Yes. So apologies if I didn't mean to sort of cause an issue there. I think that issue around housing is really important, and I think we all know. Housing is one of the big issues we have, whether it's for all demographics and all age groups, and certainly that the recognition that there are people who I think would be keen to downsize potentially, which would free up property, is a really good one. And I think again part of the work that's going on at the moment with the housing board, looking at objective housing need and actually understanding what do we need and where is really important, because again we need to make sure that when we do make decisions, they are calculated decisions and costed decisions, and we don't just go down a rabbit hole and do one thing and realise we haven't sorted another problem out. So certainly that work is going on. I think that's very important. And as far as sort of on the care home side, and ultimately these are sort of commercial decisions, and I think what we're seeing now is more people are living in their homes for longer. No. Clearly, if there is demand for that. I would hope that there's opportunity for that capacity to be realised in the private market.
Okay, all right, Tony. Thanks for that. I've got to go on because I've had half a dozen messages about MGP, and the polite ones I can tell you. Can the minister say that he feels that shortening the MGP since 2022 hasn't been a big success? Some people aren't happy.
Yeah, and I appreciate this is a very emotive topic. We've had a really difficult festival this year. The weather was appalling, and that's made it really, really difficult. Clearly, some of these issues have been long-standing and of concern. From my point of view, I think it's important to remember that from a DFE point of view, we don't own or run the Manx Grand Prix. This is an event put on by the Manx Motorcycle Club, working closely with ACU. From a DFE point of view, of course, we offer support because we have those structures there for the TT, and we offer and help where we can operationally, and obviously the paddock. But decisions that have been made...
So it's nothing directly to do with the department, whereas the motorsport department is involved in the TT.
Yeah. So the decisions made about scheduling and timing, etc., that's something, and that was part of work that's happened in the past by the Manx Grand Prix itself through consultation and planning, and that's very much for them to decide. From our point of view,
people are asking, did you strong arm them into shortening it?
No, that's not. No, absolutely not. I mean, this is very much their event. We will support this. This has a considerable cost to us as a department. Help that support, but we recognise the importance of it. I think what we want to see, and I think what I would say to anybody, and I think this is a subject, like you say, people get very passionate about, is what we all want to see is a long-term sustainable plan for motorsport, and the Grand Prix is very much part of that. And we're happy to work with the Manx Motorcycle Club and ACU. We had meetings before the Grand Prix. We've had some meetings since then, and certainly happy to sit down with them and talk about the future, about some of the challenges, recognising that this type of event now is struggling elsewhere. It is a challenge. There are costs involved, so we want to make sure we can make it work for the future, and we're happy to sit down with them and help where we can.
Okay. If I could just add, I think absolutely there's been a lot of feedback. There's been a lot of emotion. There's been a lot of criticism. Really keen to stress and add what the Minister said, but there are many decisions made by various different elements of organisations that are done for the best intentions, with a lot of complexity behind it that perhaps sometimes it's difficult to appreciate from the outside. What I would just say is, particularly this year, looking back, also taking some of the feedback from previous years, I know there is a commitment from all parties to take some of that feedback on board, to go back and look at what can be done to try and respond to that. But it is really, really complex. There are lots of considerations, but I just want to emphasise, I know, there's a real desire to say, let's listen, let's look at it, and let's see if there are specific things that can change. Bearing in mind, as Minister said, this is absolutely not our event. It's not government's event, but we are a real stakeholder. We are a real supportive partner in that, and we will do what we can to try and make sure, as Minister said, that there is a really successful event for many years to come.
Okay, has the dust settled on TT 2024? How was it for the department?
I think there is still a little bit of just wait until the end of the year to check the numbers and how they fit with everything else, but generally the feedback right across the economy, right across society, from a race perspective, amazing racing, from a visitor perspective, really, really strong numbers, from a spend perspective, economic perspective, really strong numbers, and more and more people watch the event over our broadcast channels around the world, so definitely lots of positivity that come from that. But as always, we take a step back, we listen, we learn, we move forward.
And is it true emotions do get high regarding TT and MGP?
Absolutely. It's an interesting space for government to be in something like this, but there are passions from all aspects of that. And
it's part of our DNA, Dan, Andy, isn't it? Motorsport. It's people have real passions about it. That's understandable.
Thanks for being with us today, Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin. Next Tuesday, David Ashford is here, Chair of the Communities and Housing Board. We'll be talking about, the vexed question of housing. And a week today, the Chief Minister's on. Alfred Cannon, MHK, will be on Mannin Line. Back with an open line on Monday. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phone today. Enjoy the weather. Have a good weekend.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation station. This is Manx Radio.
Hector Duff was an extraordinary Manxman. Holder of the Military Medal for Bravery and an OBE, he spent many hours telling school pupils about his war experiences, which included coming ashore on D-Day. Before he joined up, though, his memories were of farming in the island.
Because they had meadows down at Sulby.
Oh, yes.
Down the Kellier, not the Keller, the Kellier we call it.
Right.
And the Kellier.
What do they keep there?
Just hay. They used to cut the meadows for the hay for the winter for their own horses. And that entailed, there was 2 horses. You had to have a trace horse, but Willie had a stable down at Thalta Will, which is now the craft centre. There's this craft centre there now.
Yes.
And I would go down with the 2 horses and the stiff cart, which was called a flat bogey, and I'd leave one, the trace horse there, so I'd leave him in the stalls there and feed him, and I would go on with the one horse down to Sulby and load it up with hay. And the stiff carts, it weren't a flat bottom one, and with being the hills, the back of it sloped up quite high, so it stopped the load slipping off.
Yeah.
So I would load it